Okay, so I'm gonna hit go live. Hey, here we are. So this is second period on Thursday, and I'm trying to keep my schedule of a live video every Wednesday and Thursday. Did I say Thursday? It's really Wednesday, right? Isn't it? I don't even know. So it's the last week of the quarter, and that means I'm not adding a new assignment today, but I will give some examples and details and info, and hopefully make this short. And then if we have a little bit of time, and if I remember, I can throw out a bit of a preview of quarter 4. Remember, next week we have that weird little period where quarter 3 is over, spring break hasn't started yet. We've got a week of time where we will do a little bit of quarter 3 stuff, finishing grades. We'll do a little bit of quarter 4 stuff, but we won't start anything big because I don't want to start a big project and then have spring break create a big gap right in the middle of it. So at the beginning of quarter 4, we'll do some smaller things to sort of freshen it up and give us new ideas and start new units, but not giant assignments. Anyway, here's what we got. In this class, just to recap, we have a bunch of assignments and then 3 assessments. The assessments are what you got to focus on because that's what makes the big difference in the grade. One of them is the chatbot final steps of the project. So the chatbot has several assignments in the gradebook, like did you make the template, did you answer these questions, did you edit a little bit, etc. But then the last one was, did you put it all together, do the feedback form. Most people did it. I got it graded, no problem. And if you missed a few points, it seemed to make a big difference in your grade, but it won't in the end, because that, by the end, will not be the only thing in the assessment category. We'll have a couple others. Those will be the code HS. Okay, the code HS, this time it wasn't about coding really, it was about looking at the users, seeing what they need. Let me give a quick recap just in case somebody missed the previous videos. I assigned the first 2 lessons in the unit, and then I said you can skip the ones in the middle, take the quiz at the end. And the quiz at the end is about this process where you look at your users, see what they have, see what they need, and then you come up with some ideas. The first time you do this, you want to come up with all kinds of ideas. Don't limit it, don't criticize it, just brainstorm. And then in a later step, you pick the good ones. But at first, you want to be free to create, you know? And then once you pick those good ideas, you make them a little prototype version and test it. The important part is that you loop through this process a few times. So you make a thing, test it with a user, bring it back around, remake it, edit it, test it with a user, bring it back around, and loop through that. So when it asks on the quiz, do you do this process once? You say, no, we're going to loop through it, and iterate is the term. This happens in real life. You know, I don't know if you guys know, there was a video game last year, almost won some of the Game of the Year stuff, called Hades. And Hades was made before last year, but it was released to certain people. They would test it and they would give feedback, and then the company was a pretty small company that made it, called Supergiant, would edit it and change things and then send it out again and say, okay, what about this? And they would test it back and forth several times before they gave the real full release. And it ended up being really, you know, crisp and really fine-tuned because they had gone to all the little details already. Now, doesn't always work that way, doesn't always work out perfectly, but that's the idea, right? Now, another thing they're going to mention on the quiz, and it's going to be a term you might hear later in the code HS, is this thing called the beginner's mindset. They're going to say, is the beginner's mindset something good to have? And you're going to say yes, because you don't want to approach it like a beginner in terms of making mistakes and doing things inefficiently, but you want to imagine what a beginner user would see. If they opened your app, if they opened your web page, are they going to know what they see? Are they going to have intuitive instructions or controls or results to their input? Because here's the thing. no matter what you make, it will be used by a variety of people, including people who haven't used it before, obviously. And they're not going to know what you had in mind. They're not going to know what to pick up or focus on or ignore, etc. I mentioned this a lot in the chatbot feedback, where I said, hey, you've got a lot of beautiful code, but the user will never know it's there if they don't know that those features are there. So you got to have your chatbot tell them what it can do instead of just saying hello and then they have to magically know what to ask. Finally, the CQA is really a combination of those two things we just talked about, where you have the chatbot stuff and the CodeHS stuff, and the CQA is a reflection asking what you learned, what you did, what you might do next time. And it is not asking you to grade yourself. It's not saying, like, there's a question that says, do you think you really fulfilled the promise of your chatbot? Did you come up with an idea and then really match what the idea can do? You don't have to say yes. If you say no and then you have good reasons why certain things didn't work, or why you would do better next time, or why it sort of turned out to be different than you thought, that's fine, and you will get a correct answer on the CQA. It's not about saying yes. It's not like an interview where you have to sell yourself. Okay. Let me give an example from real life of this user experience thing. Okay. We've had a bunch of calls from teachers and mostly subs in the building who would come in the morning and turn on the computer, and they would say, hey, wait a minute, my computer's dead. I look at my monitor, I see nothing, it's a black screen. Maybe I can move the cursor, or maybe not even that. And then they would call us or call the office and say, hey, my computer's dead. Now it turns out those computers are not dead, they're actually completely fine. But these boards, the active panels, they're called, these big TV touchscreen guys, that a lot of rooms just got recently, so they haven't gotten used to it. Sometimes, if you turn on the computer, it will boot up and display the Lenovo starting screen and the Windows login screen on that board, but not the monitor. And this is for silly reasons about how it has to be set as the main screen in order for the touch to work, and blah, blah, blah. But if they're not looking at that, or if they don't have the board on, they'll see the monitor and see nothing. Now, when we get those questions, we could scoff and be like, yeah, all you have to turn on the board, man. You fool, you imbecile, how do you not know that? But it's very reasonable that they would assume if you turn on a computer, it shows up on the monitor. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything out of the ordinary. And you can't blame somebody for assuming that if you turn on the dang computer, it's going to show up on the monitor in front of you. So we either need to explain that really well in a way that's going to stick permanently, or more likely, we need to fix it so that, yeah, even though the board's got to be the main screen in terms of getting the touch to work, we still want something to show up on the monitor, because that's what a human expects when they push the power button on the dang machine. So the point is, you got to imagine what your user is thinking and what they could reasonably think, even if you're not talking to one at the moment. Another example, and then I'll end this because I don't want the video to be a million minutes long, is yesterday I had a class. I had a sci-fi and fantasy literature class. I'm still an English teacher, and I still have a few English classes, even though I got the computer stuff this year. And I have one elective called Sci-Fi and Fantasy Literature. And in that class, we were talking about comic books. Recently, we've been talking about comic books and superhero stuff, and we watched a documentary about that and did a couple assignments. And I said, hey, you know what? I'll bring in some comic books. I have a bunch of X-Men. Okay, I'm a fan of X-Men. I had some paperbacks, some collections, and I brought them in. I was like, okay, here's the Days of Future Past. Here's some X-23 stuff. Here's some Dark Phoenix stuff. And I laid it out. And you know what? Nobody touched it. Nobody cared. They were like, yeah, whatever. I don't know why. I don't know if I was expecting something different, but they didn't really jump up. You know, they like X-Men movies and they like superhero, MCU, video game, whatever. But if you just hand the book, didn't thrill people the way I thought it might. Now, okay, that means I just do something else next time. You know, I'm not going to try to get mad and say, no, you guys gotta look at this. You're wrong. You need to change, okay? No, they are wrong. They're great. But I can't change that. So I'm going to take the books home and enjoy them myself. And the other people, I'll have to present something else in a different way. And that's okay. When you have your users, your customers, your students, whatever it is, and you try something and they don't respond, then there's no use in raging against that. It's more about observing the situation, observing what works and what doesn't, and saying, okay, maybe next time we would show something. If I wanted to show an older X-Men thing, maybe I'd show the 90s cartoon or one of the good arcade games from the early 90s or something like that. Or maybe like a YouTube presentation of like somebody going through the books and showing the panels and narrating over it in a cool way. I don't know. The point is, you got to think about your user and what they're going to do, and you can't tell them what to do, even though that would be easy. You have to work with what you've got. So this is our quarter 3 thing. Quarter 4, we're going to use this, but doing new stuff, and we'll do a tiny one next week, big one when we get back after spring break. And that's it for now. I'm going to end this video and open up the grade book, do some grades, answer some questions, all that good stuff. Thanks.